Shriekers by Orgasm. I stared out into the grey of another bleak winter morning and found myself lacking yet again. Slamming the door closed, I reluctantly resigned another day to the coward's ash pile. All those fleeting moments, minutes, hours, all wasted in perpetual fear of an unknown evil, the whole time knowing that the weight of responsibility fell squarely on my head alone. The very last one. I hadn't left my house in days, weeks possibly. The passage of time had slowed to an agonising crawl, giving the impression of much longer. There's nothing left for me out there, I affirmed in the mirror, my daily mantra, as if trying to convince someone other than myself. Nothing at all. I peeked out through the blinds and watched a former neighbour shuffle down the street, a monstrous shambling gait, the mangled stump of its foot dragged listlessly behind as it sluggishly made its way round the bend and out of sight. They were everywhere, waiting and ready in the shadows where I couldn't see, shrieking. Every night was the same. Their bizarre mating call blared out into the otherwise dead twilight, rendering me from any peaceful sleep I may have enjoyed. It was blood-curdling, like they were being flayed alive, and yet still with something joyous and terrible simmering underneath, a wailing of ecstasy and hunger. They called me mad when I began fortifying my home. All the locks and shutters, well, who's mad now? The Shriekers, that's who, utterly insane, driven only by their base desires and a desire to dominate, they wish to assimilate me too. I was so afraid, but I knew what needed to be done from the very start. I had to go back outside. I had to burn them in their nest. Summoning up all the spine I could muster, I silently slipped out through the front door and over to theirs across the street on that freezing dark night. I could hear them moving around inside, yelping and shrieking as always. A thick sliver of disgust shone through the terror as my jittering hands fumbled with the lid on the petrol canister. I regained some composure as I focused on my mission. It spun off, clanking against the cold metal body of its hosts noisily. I swallowed a lump in my throat as I reassured myself that I was still, as of yet, undetected. I attached the plastic hose, and the pungent liquid flowed freely through the letterbox. I made sure to be quick about it. Just one slip-up and it'll be over. They'd be on me like wild dogs to a feast. The canister ran dry, now the lighter. I flicked its ignition repeatedly before finally striking flame. One last look around, and in it went. The house... Oh, you should have seen it. The house immediately erupted in flames, and I retreated back to safety, desperate to get inside before the swarm arrived to salvage its sickening brood. I observed, half in glee and half in a deadening dread, as the nest was engulfed. Then, just as expected, the others arrived. There's an awful wailing tearing into the night. I shuddered as I closed the blinds, hoping this would at least thin them out a little bit, if not force them to move on from the area entirely. How I longed for the day when I could venture out without fear of an attack, to rebuild, and to restock my ever-dwindling supplies. The start of a whole new world, a better world, like the old one. My eyes began to close as I fell into a deep sleep. The shrieking outside now was a familiar white noise of sorts, lulling me. I awoke to a loud banging on the front door. They'd found me! I loaded the cartridges into my revolver, rounds spilling onto the floor from the box as I panicked. More banging. I couldn't ignore it this time. They were never going to move on, not until they had me. I knew it in that moment. I wasn't going down without a fight. Through the shuddering sight, I stared down the barrel of the revolver as I descended down the stairs, growing closer and closer. The rattling pounded its way throughout the house, each knock making me flinch. I fired 3 shots through the door. The knocking stopped, but they weren't done. A while later, they returned. I could hear an immense growling emanating from the street outside, and I took position, gun aimed shakily at the entryway. But it was no use. A blinding flash filled the room, and I dropped my weapon after only one misguided discharge. I was then rushed by that horde, and I tumbled to the floor, screaming till the very last. I felt something sharp prick my neck, and it all went dark. That was some time ago. A long time ago. Many years, in fact. I'm still in their cage, as you can see. But they'll never get me. I won't fall for their tricks. They've taken the form of humans, a sick mockery of their former lives as normal people, in their never-ceasing attempts to assimilate me, their pills and potions fueling the illusion. They tell me that I'm a murderer, that I'm very unwell, that I'm in a hospital and that the doctors are here to help me. They even dressed up one of their own as my brother. My fucking brother. He perished in the initial outbreak. Lies. It's all lies. They know that when I, the last one, am assimilated, that they'll finally be able to cover the planet entirely. They underestimate me, though. My resolve is strong, and when I escape this place, I will burn them until there was no more. Not a single shrieking demon remains. I'm not scared anymore.